Men's Minute, Modcast with his mates, Mo, Perry, Sadia, and special guest Barry.
Hello,
Episode
and welcome to another episode of
230.
Men's Minute Modcast with his mates. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, man.
Okay, now we have a special guest with us today. We have the awesome Barry. Hello, Barry.
Hey, yeah, great to be here, man, with everybody on this Modcast. I love seeing all of you at the same time. It's pretty cool. And it's getting smarter all the time and helping me get better. And I think that's probably where it really kicked off for me.
So, Barry, you talked about tools being overwhelming today. So, have you thought of a model that one can break down so that tools do not come first? Something else comes first before they even decide on a tool.
Yeah, well, that's again one of the models we sort of were just talking about. I call it the 3T model: the traits, tasks, and tools. So again, most people jump straight to tools because that's what they hear, right? The FOMO in the industry is you need to use this tool. You're falling behind. You're going to be replaced. You're going to be fired. So what happens is people jump straight to tools, and it's not even the right tool for how they work. It's not even the right tool for the job that they're trying to focus on. So for me, again, that's why I started with my natural traits. Like, how do I do my best work? And it's an honest question. You have to ask yourself. Some people draw, some people type, some people talk out loud. Everybody has a different set of characteristics about how they do their best work. And really what you need to start thinking about is understanding yourself, understanding the highest leverage tasks that you have, and then what are the tools that are going to amplify, augment, and help you do your best natural work, your very human work, but it's supported by these technologies that actually get the best out of you, and you're not fighting against them. And this is what I saw again and again with execs and founders, is they pick up a tool, it wouldn't suit their working style, it caused friction, and then they would sort of settle down to say, well, these tools just aren't ready yet. They're not good enough yet. As almost like a protection mechanism, right? And again, this is one of the things we found the most. I did a survey with 5,000 execs on my mailing list. Most of them feel like they're incompetent, and what's even worse, when you're the most senior person, and you feel like you should know something and you don't know something and you have to learn it in front of the whole company, that is a very unsafe environment. That is a difficult place to be. So again, leaders are feeling this pressure that they have to know this stuff, and they don't, because you can only learn it by doing it. I know you all do know that because you've obviously spent a huge amount of time playing with these things and using them. So, again, it's lonely at the top. It's worse when you feel like you don't know what you don't know, and it's even worse when you feel like you have to learn it in front of everybody and make mistakes. So again, that was one of the ahas again of helping these leaders. Often all they need is like 3 or 4 sessions where you teach them 1 or 2 sort of first principles and frameworks, and these are super smart people, so instantly then they get their head around the first principles and the first frameworks, and they just take off, But it's very hard because they've no time or space to think at the moment. And that's, again, one of the lessons I've certainly learned from both working with the founders in the studio, but also, executives who are running these companies too as well.
So as you just said about leadership and how they're a little bit interacting with AI, do you feel like there's an identity threat for them using AI in their business and organization? What's happening with leaders with AI right now?
Yeah, I think everybody has that. Like, I have that, right? And like, that is one of the toughest parts, right? Like, this is, challenging people's identity about how they've always worked. For most people, they've probably built their career, their reputation, because they've had long tenure in the job. They're great at recall, pattern matching. They've been in the domain for so long, right? They have this sort of implicit, tacit knowledge that maybe help them not only be successful, maybe even rise to the top. And now we're in a world where that isn't really a competitive advantage anymore, because information is democratized. So you have people who might just be new to a domain, but they're really good at finding the information required to make difficult decisions. And in some instances, they start outperforming people that have been in the job for 10 years. And that sort of scares a lot of folks. one of the case studies in the book is with a guy called Joe Narenya. He was the COO of global markets for HSBC. And what Joe used to do is he would invite graduates every year they came into the company to work on problems that he was working on, specifically just to see how they would solve them, what tools and techniques that they would use. So you can imagine in a company that's quite hierarchical like that, where you've got one of the most senior people sitting with the most junior people and learning about how they solve these problems. It's a really powerful cultural artifact. So I think this is sort of where we're all at now. Again, you have to almost let go of the ego, the fear, and really challenge yourself and say, no, I've got to redesign how I work. Because there are people who are doing that and they're achieving human plus machine outcomes versus you just human outcomes on your own. And I think we can both sort of extrapolate, how that goes over time with any new technologies that's come into the workforce. So it's important people, start to experiment. You can't really sit on the sidelines. Well, you can, but that's a choice. And, I think that's, again, why it's challenging a lot of people's identity. The machines are not going to replace you, but they are going to expose how good you are at thinking, deciding, and acting. And people then who embrace these tools are just going to get better at it. It's that simple.
Makes sense, yeah. I have a follow-up question as well. I think your background as well has been looking into agile transformations and things like that before too. So comparing this with agile transformation and now going into AI, how do you think this will differ in implementing in the upcoming years in businesses? Would that be companies like not adopting agile, for example, same thing with AI, and just staying behind, or how would that look like?
Yeah, I think, I'm lucky enough to have seen a number of these, right? My first ever job was the internet. I worked for a company called citysearch.com. It was one of the first companies ever incubated by Idealab, which was the first ever venture studio. So I saw how the internet changed how we did business, right? Mobile adoption, that changed how we interacted and where we could be connected with devices. Agile was about changing how people worked. It was really about managing complexity and smaller feedback cycles and iteration and learning. That turned into the lean startup movement, which obviously I wrote a book as part of that in Lean Enterprise. And then cloud computing came along, continuous delivery came along, all these new waves of innovation come along. And I've seen what happens each one. And initially they always look sort of deceptive. They look like they're not going to have a big impact. There's and anyone who tries to experiment with them actually sort of slows down for a period of time because they're in a learning mode. So they sort of have to unlearn a lot of the things that made them successful in the past. But then they hit this sort of tipping point where, the gears kick into sort of function, and then they just accelerate way past people who are stuck doing what they've always done, right? And again, I think we're at that moment here again where, again, the tools even 12 months ago, 24 months ago, were still, naive. They were still learning. They were kind of broken, and a lot of them are still not that great. But you can start to feel that we're on a new sort of innovation curve. And again, for people who can start to experiment now, that's an opportunity for them to get a front row seat to the beginning of the show, and that's exciting for me because I enjoy it.